There is a city in Mexico called Cholula. It has a pyramid, one of the largest pyramids by volume in the world. And beneath that pyramid, in the soil, in the rock, in the geological record, there is evidence of what happened the last time the volcano 34 kilometers away produced a full-scale Plinian eruption. The lahars from that eruption buried Cholula, not partially. The mud flows flooded the terrain and rendered it useless for agriculture. Researchers found evidence of that destruction at the base of the pyramid itself. The lahars were so extensive, so total, that scientists believe they may have been responsible for the fall of the pre-Hispanic city entirely. That was approximately 800 CE, 70 kilometers from where those lahars ended their run. 26 million people live in the greater Mexico City metropolitan area today, the largest metropolitan area in the Western Hemisphere. And this week, the VAAC Washington, the Volcanic Ash Advisory Center, operated by the United States for North American airspace, confirmed an ash plume from Popocatépetl reaching 19,000 feet above sea level, moving south into flight corridors, into the same airspace that connects Mexico City's international airport to the world. The alert level is yellow phase 2, level 4 on a 7-level scale, not the maximum, not even close to the maximum. And that is not even the worst part. The worst part is what yellow phase 2 actually means for the 26 million people living within the volcanic hazard radius of a mountain that has been erupting continuously. Not occasionally, not periodically, but continuously, since December 21st, 1994, 32 years without stopping. A mountain that is the second highest peak in North America, a mountain that, in its last major Plinian eruption, buried a city, and whose glaciers, the ice sitting on its upper slopes, are the mechanism that turns an explosive eruption into a lahar that reaches the doorsteps of the communities that rebuilt in the valleys beneath it. Before we begin, hit like and subscribe to Global Fault Line so you don't miss updates as this situation develops. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and tell me this: 26 million people, 70 kilometers, a volcano that has been erupting for 32 years, and an alert level that is currently 4 out of 7. At what level does it become your problem? Drop that in the comments. Let's get into it. Mexico's Volcanic Monitoring Agency, CENAPRED, the National Center for Disaster Prevention, operates one of the most sophisticated volcanic alert systems in Latin America. The Semáforo de Alerta Volcánica, the volcanic alert semaphore, runs on 7 levels from green through yellow to red, each triggering a specific set of civil protection responses. At yellow phase 2, the current level, CENAPRED is running 24-hour monitoring of seismic activity, gas emissions, ground deformation, and ash column height. Automatic exclusion zones are active. Access to the upper slopes within 12 kilometers of the summit is prohibited. Communities in the 3 closest hazard zones are under standing evacuation-ready protocols. That system was built after 1994. Before December 21st of that year, Popocatépetl had been dormant for approximately 70 years. Nobody living within its hazard radius had seen it active. No modern monitoring infrastructure existed. No evacuation plans had been designed and tested. No hazard maps had been distributed to the communities in the drainage valleys beneath the summit. When it woke up on December 21st, 1994, the ash column reached 7 kilometers in height. The Puebla state government announced evacuations of 75,000 people. Scientists had days, not weeks, to produce the first hazard maps and establish the protocols that now form the backbone of Mexico's response architecture. That architecture has been tested repeatedly since. In December 2000, the first pyroclastic flows of the current eruptive cycle traveled several kilometers down the flanks. 41,000 people were evacuated. In 2023, ash columns exceeded 10 kilometers and reached Mexico City itself, forcing temporary closures of the international airport. Here is what the system has never been tested against. The 3 states surrounding Popocatépetl, Mexico State, Puebla, and Morelos, have a combined population that places tens of millions of people in the secondary and tertiary hazard zones. The evacuation routes from the highest risk communities run through highway corridors that serve simultaneously as commercial transport arteries, tourism routes, and daily commuter infrastructure. In December 2000, 41,000 people were evacuated. The next scale of event, a larger dome collapse, a prolonged explosive sequence exceeding current parameters, a shift in alert level to phase 3 or above, would require the coordinated evacuation of a multiple of that number through road networks shared with millions of daily commuters from Puebla, Cuernavaca, and the Mexico City periphery. CENAPRED is monitoring this with every instrument it has. The question the current ash advisory raises is not whether the monitoring works. The question is whether the logistics of the response scale to the population at risk, and whether 32 years of continuous lower-level activity have normalized the threat in the minds of the 26 million people who have grown up watching a smoking volcano on the horizon without ever evacuating from it. The ash plume VAAC Washington confirmed at 19,000 feet is not by itself an unusual event for Popocatépetl in 2026. The volcano has been producing ash advisories consistently through May. Plumes at 19,000 feet, plumes at 20,000, a plume at 21,000 feet on May 14th, a plume at 23,000 feet, just under 7,000 meters, recorded in mid-May. CENAPRED documented 198 low-intensity exhalations in a single 24-hour period between May 18th and May 19th, along with 6.5 minutes of high-frequency tremor. So why does this week's advisory matter more than the previous ones? To answer that, you need to understand what Popocatépetl is doing structurally, and why the mechanism that drives its eruptions is categorically different from a simple open vent system like Kilauea or Stromboli. Popocatépetl operates on a dome building and dome destruction cycle. Fresh magma rises into the crater and forms a lava dome, a plug of solidified lava that seals the vent. Pressure builds beneath that plug. When the pressure exceeds the mechanical strength of the dome fails. The failure can be gradual, generating the low-intensity exhalations and ash plumes that fill the VAAC advisories week after week, or it can be sudden. A sudden dome failure is not an ash plume event. It is a dome collapse event. The dome material, hot, fragmented rock, avalanches down the flanks at high velocity. The collapse exposes the pressurized magma beneath. The interaction between that magma, the collapsing material, and the glacier ice on the upper slopes produces pyroclastic flows, fast, hot, traveling kilometers from the summit in minutes. In December 2000, dome collapse produced the first pyroclastic flows of the current eruptive cycle. Those flows traveled several kilometers. They were not the worst case. They were a demonstration of the mechanism. Think of the dome as a pressure cooker lid being held down by clamps. Every ash plume is steam escaping around the edges, pressure releasing gradually through the gaps. The lid is doing its job, but every release cycle also stress tests the clamps. And if the pressure builds faster than the clamps can vent it, the lid does not lift gradually, it blows. The 19,000-foot plume this week is steam escaping around the edges. What CENAPRED is watching, in the seismic data, in the deformation measurements, in the tremor duration, is whether the clamps are holding. The last major Plinian eruption of Popocatépetl occurred around 800 CE EVEI4, pyroclastic flows reaching more than 20 kilometers from the summit. Lahars channeled by glacier meltwater down every major drainage valley surrounding the mountain. Those lahars buried Cholula. They reached the base of the pyramid. They rendered the agricultural land useless. They may have ended the city. The most powerful known eruptions of Popocatépetl, rated VEI5, occurred around 3700 BCE and 200 BCE. In the geological record, this volcano has produced events that dwarf anything the modern monitoring era has observed. The current eruptive phase, which began December 21, 1994, has not yet produced a Plinian eruption. It has produced 32 years of continuous lower-level activity, dome building, dome destruction, ash columns, occasional pyroclastic flows, airport closures, partial evacuations, and one essential psychological consequence that scientists who study risk perception have documented directly in the communities surrounding Popocatépetl. Normalization published research on risk perception in communities around the volcano has identified a consistent pattern. The populations who have lived through 32 years of this activity have developed a calibrated but incomplete mental model of what Popocatépetl does. They know the ash plumes, they know the exclusion zones, they know when CENAPRED issues warnings and when it does not. What they do not have, what no living person in central Mexico has, is direct experience of what this volcano does at the scale the geological record documents. No living person in the hazard zone has seen a Plinian column from Popocatépetl. No living person has seen lahars from Popocatépetl travel 34 kilometers to the base of a pyramid. The 800 CE eruption is documented in the rock, not in memory. The echo of 800 CE is not in any evacuation plan. It is not in the CENAPRED hazard map in a way that 26 million people have internalized as a personal scenario. It is in the sediment around the pyramid at Cholula, 34 kilometers from the crater, waiting to be relevant again. Here is the factor behind every ash advisory VAAC Washington has issued for Popocatépetl this month that does not appear in the aviation bulletins. The glacier. Popocatépetl sits at 5,426 meters above sea level. At that altitude, permanent ice and snow cover the upper slopes. That glacial ice is not incidental to the volcano's hazard profile. It is the mechanism that transforms an explosive eruption into a lahar, and that extends the reach of the hazard from the immediate slope to the drainage valleys tens of kilometers away. When dome collapse occurs and pyroclastic flows race down the flanks, they contact glacial ice. That contact is not slow, it is instantaneous. The ice melts, or more precisely, it flashes to water and steam under the heat of the pyroclastic material. That water mixes with volcanic debris, with loose pyroclastic deposits on the slopes, with the sediment in the drainage channels below. The result is a lahar, moving at speeds that have been documented at up to 70 kilometers per hour in large-scale events at comparable volcanoes, carrying rock, ice, ash, and everything in the drainage path, downslope toward communities that may have 30 minutes of warning. The drainage systems from Popocatépetl flow into the states of Mexico, Puebla, and Morelos. The communities closest to those drainage channels have been specifically identified in CENAPRED's risk assessment as subject to lahar hazard at levels that define the inner exclusion zones. Those communities have evacuation protocols. The evacuation routes have been mapped and field verified. But here is the variable that the current advisory cycle is not discussing. The glacier at Popocatépetl has been retreating. Decades of continuous thermal activity from the volcano below, combined with regional temperature changes, have reduced the ice coverage on the upper slopes measurably since 1994. Less ice means less water available for lahar generation in a dome collapse scenario, which sounds reassuring. But it also means the character of lahars from this volcano in a future large event will differ from the character of lahars documented in the geological record. The hazard models are built on the geological record. The glacier that fed those historical lahars is smaller than it was. The drainage channels below are loaded with 32 years of accumulated volcanic deposits, loose material sitting in river valleys, ready to be mobilized by the first large water input. What replaces the glacier water in a lahar scenario is not absence of lahar. It is lahar fed by rainfall interaction with accumulated pyroclastic deposits, a mechanism that can produce flows in the days and weeks after an eruptive event rather than in the hours during it. Flows that arrive outside the expected warning window, flows that communities prepared for an immediate dome collapse scenario may not be positioned to respond to. That is the variable sitting behind every VAAC advisory this month that is not in the bulletin. This is global fault line. Popocatépetl has been erupting continuously since December 21, 1994, 32 years without stopping. In the week ending May 27, 2026, VAAC Washington confirmed ash plumes at 19,000 feet, 20,000 feet, 21,000 feet, and 23,000 feet. CENAPRED recorded 198 low-intensity exhalations in a single 24-hour period. High-frequency tremor lasting 6.5 minutes. Volcano tectonic earthquakes at magnitude 1.3 and 1.6. All consistent with ongoing dome building and partial dome destruction activity, all within the parameters that define Yellow Alert Phase 2, Level 4 of 7 on Mexico's volcanic alert scale. 26 million people live within the volcanic hazard radius. The evacuation plans cover the inner zones. The road networks that serve those plans also serve tens of millions of daily commuters. The lahars that the geological record documents from this volcano reached 34 kilometers from the crater and buried a city. The glacier that historically fed those lahars is smaller than it was in 1994. The accumulated volcanic deposits in the drainage valleys are larger than they have ever been in the monitoring era. The current alert level is not the maximum. It is not close to the maximum. What it is communicating, in the language of a monitoring system that has been watching this volcano longer than any comparable system in Latin America, is that the dome cycle is active, the ash production is sustained, and the parameters that would require escalation to Phase 3 or above have not yet been met. Not yet. The mountain that buried Cholula 1,200 years ago is 70 kilometers from Mexico City. It has been smoking every day since 1994, and the 26 million people who have grown up watching it from the horizon have never seen what it can do at full scale. This analysis is based on official VAAC, Washington advisories, and CENAPRED daily monitoring reports for May 2026, verified through Volcano Discovery's Advisory Archive and the Global Volcanism Program. Historical data sourced from peer-reviewed publications in Ciencias, Science Direct, and Volcano Atlas. All data publicly available and traceable. This does not represent a prediction of future volcanic activity. If you are watching from Mexico City, from Puebla, from Cuernavaca, or from anywhere in central Mexico, drop a comment. Tell me if you can see the smoke on the horizon from where you are right now. And tell me this: 32 years of continuous eruption, an ash column at 19,000 feet this week, a geological record that says this volcano has buried cities, and 26 million people who have never personally experienced what that looks like at scale. Is 32 years of smaller activity The preparation for what comes next? Or is it the reason people stopped worrying? Drop that in the comments. I read everyone.